558-8656. Your meeting ID would be 838-5431-1714. These instructions have been provided by the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, and it's on their website. If anybody has a problem accessing the meeting, please call 603-669-4664 or email mduchesne@southernhampshireplanningcommission.org. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. So based on that, I'll call to order and do a roll call. I'll start with Sylvia.
All right, so let's do the roll call. All right, Sylvia Von Owlet, SNHPC.
Okay.
Candy, we have Dick Snow.
I am present, but I haven't had my coffee yet today, so you'll just have to suffer.
Derry, we have George Theoris.
Present.
Francistown, Linda Kuhnhart.
Present.
In Hooksett, we have Bruce Thomas.
Hello.
Manchester, Jonathan Golden.
Hello.
Good morning. New Boston, there's Mark Sunan.
I'm here.
Morning. For our transit providers today, we have Fred Roberge from Easter Seals.
Here.
Let's see, from DOT, we have Lucy St. John.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. From the Greater Manchester Dairy Londonderry Chambers of Commerce, we have Nancy Michaels.
Yep, here.
Thank you, Nancy. And from DES, we have Tim White.
Present.
And just also to note, for a non-voting member, we have Dean Williams. Also for staff, we have Maddie Giano, Monique DeChesney, Carl Epic, Adam Lasney, Nate Miller, Cam Prohlman, James Veo, Zach Swick. And I've already announced myself. So there you have it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Sylvia. Appreciate it. Okay, moving along. Next item is the minutes from November 19th. You have should have them electronically, and people want to review or have any comments or revisions.
Do we have oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'll move to accept the minutes from the previous meeting. Linda Kuhnhart, Francistown.
Okay, we have a motion by Linda for Francistown. Is there a second?
I'll second that. Mark's from New Boston.
Okay, so thank you, Mark from New Boston. Okay, I'll make any no changes. I'll just say all those in favor say aye, or thumbs up. I mean, thumbs up if you approve.
Since I don't have everyone's visual.
Roll call, Sylvia?
Tim White. Well, we like to do the roll call, so I'm going to quick do that just
Okay.
to make it official. It's, I don't want to get in trouble with the higher authorities like Santa. Candia, Dick Snow.
Aye.
Derry, George Theoris.
Aye.
Francistown, Linda.
Yes.
Hooksett Town, Bruce.
Aye.
Manchester, Jonathan.
Aye.
New Boston, Mark.
Aye.
Fred Roberge.
Abstain.
Abstain, thank you. Nancy Michaels.
Yes. Yes, aye.
Thanks, Nancy, and Tim. All right, great. Oh, and I say yes. Okay.
Thank you, Sylvia. Okay, moving along. We're doing good. The agenda item is Southern Hampshire Planning Commission congestion management process. There was an attachment. I know Carl Epic had talked about this in previous meetings, so I'll turn it over to Carl and he can give us a summary and what action we need to take. Carl.
Thank you, George.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody on this nice snowy day. I've got a brief presentation. I'm going to switch screens right now. Host disabled participant screen sharing. I'll let Sylvia deal with that.
Yeah, we had an issue, so I had to do that. Okay.
But high level overview, what we're going to do here right now is you may all recall that last month we
you go ahead, Carl, share your screen. Yeah.
there it is. See if it comes up. You guys see this PowerPoint?
Yes.
Call it's on.
Okay, here we go. All right, now I gotta move you guys over. There we go. Okay, last month, Federal Highway came in and, well, came online here like all of you in our new way we meet, and went over our documents and did our quadrennial review, I guess it's called. And we had just completed the CMP, as you'll recall. So that was part of our review. And they provided some great comments, and we've added them now into the CMP. So last month, for those of you who weren't here, we opened up a public hearing. I'm sorry, you guys recommended it to go to the MPO, and MPO opened up a public hearing and has carried it forward so we could get these comments and edits incorporated into the CMP. So now that that's done, I'm just going to go over, there were 14 comments. We've consolidated some of them. This should take no more than 10 minutes. If you have questions along the way, feel free to ask them, or if you want to wait till the end, that's an appropriate time to do so as well. All right, getting right into it. Just a refresher, CMP is now a completely region-wide network of roads. Here's the list of them. They're all primary, interstates, turnpike, state routes, throughout the region, and that was developed a few years ago. We developed these maps. We did a corridor-based plan or corridor-based assessment. So end-to-end, including NHS and non-NHS components of the network of the corridors, bi-directional. We developed these nice, lifesaver colored maps that kind of break down whether or not green being no congestion or super mild congestion all the way through red, which is congested. Let's see what else is important here. We have a data set that we're using. We'll be getting this every couple of years. And we've partnered with the MPOs and RPCs throughout the state to get this expanded data set coverage. And the plan ultimately identifies quarter-specific congestion management strategies, segment by segment. Meaning, something at one end in Goffstown on 114 may have a different strategy than 114 in Bedford, just for example. So getting into the comments real quickly here. Some of them were just general. The Federal Highway was happy that we used the CMP guidebook, these federal documents they put together to help the MPOs out, which includes an 8-step process. They also liked that we did what we said in the 2010 CMP, and we used data, not real time, but actual large sets of data to look at travel time performance throughout these corridors. And we developed these maps to make it really easy to see where congestion is, both in the morning and in the evening, AM and PM time periods. They also provide us with some examples of other MPOs, CMPs, just as an additional resource in case we wanted to see how other people did it and what we could incorporate. All we have here is that we acknowledge they didn't actually say to do anything here, just we acknowledge it and reviewed their other comments, which were more directive and suggestive. For example, comment 3, suggested enhancing our introduction with a narrative of how we approach the CMP update, who was involved, what changed, the role of public involvement, etc. And so now we've done that. Our recommended response is we added a narrative explaining that the corridors and network were done in conjunction with TAC members and reviewed by the MPO members, and that partner agency staff were represented as well. So this is, really a collaborative effort to identify which corridors and what the network looked like, and now that this is all added narrative. We also added additional narrative that the updated document was prepared by staff and included a public comment period and hearing. Comment 4 recommended providing more narrative around our regional objectives in the region section that provides clarity and consistency of appropriate goals and objectives between the MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and those in the CMP. And our response, we've added narrative describing the MTP goals and objectives and how they connect to required and relevant performance measures. And this was timely because, as you all know, we're going to touch on this a lot in the next presentation. We just reviewed and updated our MTP goals and objectives, and we were able to use the updated goals and objectives and compare them. They carried forward mostly from our last MTP, but we have adjusted the language. So that is all consistent with the not yet adopted MTP the 2020 to 2045 MTP that we're going to be adopting early next year.
Carl, one moment, I'm gonna
Sure.
interrupt you real quick. Does anyone know who Mike Weider is? Weider?
I just did a quick Google search and it looks like somebody by that name is associated with the town of Chester.
Okay,
Keep going.
yes.
All right, comment 5, summary. In our definition of the SNHPC regional network section, they recommended providing enhanced narrative on how some routes are only partially designated as national highway system, and discuss the lengths and termini and how the routes were selected. Again, we already covered how they were selected. We've added a table now that lists each corridor and a column on the lengths of the corridor and whether or not it's all in NHS or if it's only partial. If it's partial, it gives a list of the termini, from point A to point B from these two intersecting places. So that's a nice way to clearly see the total lengths of the network, the roadway, and breakdown of what's NHS and what is not. So summary of comments 6 and 7, we lumped these together. This is in our definition of performance measures section. They recommended explaining the 3 performance measures which we've included in our using for our CMP: travel time index, level of truck time reliability, and truck travel time reliability. We really focus on travel time index, TTI, and that's what that's kind of what we have the best data for. And they wanted this to be broken down by corridor and kind of presented in a dashboard approach. So our recommended response was to do this, to create this dashboard approach. However, it's really only TTI again that we have available, and the LOTTR and TTR figures are included in this table. But as we get better data in the future, we'll be able to really blow this out and make it more of an elaborate presentation and compare it over time. Comment 7 is in our data and monitoring of system performance section. Federal Highway recommended that an update on data collection activities be provided, explaining the relationship between these activities and the CMP and our overall MPO planning process. And our recommended response is we've added narrative of our current data collection programs. You're all going to be familiar with these. This is the travel demand model, which includes a lot of demographic data and information about the geography, origins, and destinations. Our traffic counts, the traffic counting program we do every summer, into the fall, spring, summer, and fall. Vehicle classification counts, bike ped counts, and then the other programs and data that's collected when we do them, such as high crash locations, traffic signal warrant studies, and road safety audits. All just standard stuff we do. They just wanted us to include, that this all is intertwined and related to dealing with congestion and making solutions. Comment 8 is in our data and monitoring of system performance section. And we were asked about adjustments to TTI thresholds. This gets pretty technical, but basically the travel time index thresholds do not vary between road types. However, we did adjust the free flow speed based on road classification with what we've presented. And the recommended response is really no need for edits. In the future, we will consider incorporating different TTI thresholds for different road types and communicate these differences in delay on roadway types. That delay on an interstate is not equivalent to delay on a local road because free flow speeds, when the highway's wide open, people are exceeding the speed limit generally, 2 in the morning as compared to, during the morning and evening commutes. And those differences aren't as broad on more local or smaller state routes. Again, pretty technical, but we acknowledged it, and we will look to do additional data and analysis in the future. Comment 9, in our analysis, congestion, and identification of strategies suggestion, they suggested it could be enhanced by adding how the strategies were identified and recommended for each corridor, additional info around responsibility for implementation, the estimated cost of those projects, funding sources for them, and an implementation schedule should be included. And our recommended response is we'll add additional narrative and a table with this information into the plan. It's good stuff. It's just it's all related to developing costs, and we're not exactly certain when these projects will be built. But Nate spent a lot of time developing our projects list, and we'll be able to disseminate that information in a table form. Comment 10, again, suggested that our analysis of congestion and identification of strategies section, could be enhanced by describing some strategies that we anticipate applying regionally. And this is just, there's a lot that we do broadly working with members. And so we're recommending that we add narrative, which is already included in the draft, explaining the regional strategies that we already work on, TDM, such as flexible work schedules, time of day, going to work, active transportation, making improvements to the bicycle and pedestrian networks and operation of bicycle and pedestrian, and then land use, which is really a purview of the municipalities, but that we work in conjunction with members to do what we can to make the land use more conducive to other modes and minimizing traffic. Almost done, everyone. We got 3 more here. Summary of comment 12. They suggested that the programming and implementation strategies section could be enhanced by describing the relationship between all of our documents, the CMP, the 10-year plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and project prioritization, selection, and programming being a similar graphic to one presented in the review. And our response as an enhanced graphic has now been added to the document showing the relationship between these planning processes, which is this graphic right here. Just a refresher for you all. Down lower left is our congestion management process. And again, this is similar level of analysis as our travel demand model. And these things share data and provide calibration validation data. It assists in identifying the CMP network and CMP strategies. And then those results and recommendations, strategies reflect on projects that go into the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, up to the 10-year plan, and ultimately turns into a project at the tip level. Comment 13, it was suggested that within the programming and implementation strategies section, it could be enhanced by confirming the update schedule of the CMP and describing additional activities and resources we will use to communicate the results, the resulting issues and strategies. And our response, our recommended response, we now have a narrative that will be included with the anticipated 5-year update schedule. So we'll be collecting data over time, hopefully every 2 years, but the next actual document with some results will be in 2025, we anticipate. And that will include references to our outreach, our equity and technological means. Basically what we've adopted in the public participation plan as ways to communicate and reach out and communicate the results to the region and to you all. And lastly, comment 14, Federal Highway suggested that the programming and implementation strategies section could be enhanced by describing how we will use future CMP updates to evaluate the effectiveness of the CMP strategies and resulting projects, perhaps by corridor. Again, in this age of performance-based planning, they're looking to, have a snapshot, and then we do some projects, hopefully make some improvements, and be able to look and see the impact of those projects. So we've now, we're recommending this response. We've now included a narrative that explains that comparative travel time index data and associated mapping for the 9 corridors included in the CMP network will be included in future CMPs and with noted project improvements. You can imagine a map, just like the ones that are in there today, and we have an arrow with some call outs that say lane widening from exit 4 to exit 5 on I-293. And the result, and you'll be able to see hopefully an improvement in reduction of congestion in that segment. So again, future CMP updates will incorporate updated data to track and monitor results as compared to previous CMPs. With that, I leave you with this snowy picture, asking if you have any questions or comments.
Carl Dick Snow from Candy. I still think that slide, it's got a 11 and 6 is confusing. You ought to have 6, 7, and 11 in there anyway.
Yeah, no, yeah, we in the end, we consolidated and moved some stuff around, and I apologize for that. But all of the comments, it's just that they both related to the dashboard presentation of data.
Okay, any questions or additional questions or comments for Carl from anyone?
Hey Carl, it's Lee at Federal Highways. Just
Lee.
want to say really appreciate all the good. Hey, just appreciate all the good work that you're doing and the rest of the staff to address our comments. So it's great to see this moving forward, and also appreciate that that you guys really adjusted your schedule for adopting the CMP to incorporate a little bit of delay there to go through the review process and allowed us time to provide some comment and hopefully make it a better product. So thank you. Just wanted to say thanks and great job. And actually, if you didn't mind sending me a copy of these slides, I could also share them with the full review team. I think that'd be nice to just show them what's going on, and that you guys are definitely responding to all the comments we provided. That'd be great.
Absolutely, Lee. And just for everyone's sake, some of those comments were Lee's. Nate and I are wrapping up. It's the document itself has the edits in it, and we're just in the polishing or at that point in the process of making it into a more final product, which will obviously get to you as well. And so if you want to share that with them, give you the slides and the final product once everything's done.
Yeah, that'd be great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Great job.
Thanks, Lee.
I would move that the TAC recommend to the MPO to adopt the congestion management process.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Linda from Francistown to recommend the adoption. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by
Bruce.
Bruce. Sorry, Bruce.
All right, to go ahead and do the roll call.
Okay.
Okay. And we have been joined also by Mike Wider. Mike, can you just verify before I do the roll call that you are representative for Chester?
I am. That's Weeder.
Weider, thank you. All right, I was doing the German pronunciation. All right. All right, so I'll go around the horn, so to speak. Dick Snow in Candia?
Aye.
Mike Weider from Chester?
Aye.
George in Derry?
Aye.
Linda in Francistown?
Aye.
Bruce in Hooksett?
Aye.
Manchester, we have Jonathan?
Aye.
And New Boston, Mark?
I'm going to say nay because I think it's premature to recommend approval without actually seeing the final document that's being forwarded to the MPO.
Okay, I can appreciate that. Nay for Mark. Fred Roberge?
Aye.
Nancy Michaels?
Aye.
And Tim White?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Okay.
George, next thing on the agenda?
Yep. Thank you, everybody, and thank you again, Carl. Great job and work on that, and Nate and the staff.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Next is an update on the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. James Vale will be presenting, and there has been an attachment, and this is for information only. So, James?
All right. I think Carl's going to start us off, but I am going to run the slides for Carl, and then I'm going to do a little piece about the chapters I'm presenting, and then we'll finish off with a transition to Nate Miller presenting on probably the part you guys are interested in, which is the fiscal constraint in the project. So, Sylvia, I'm not able to share my screen at the moment. Is there a co-host process? Okay.
I'll do that right now. Okay, sorry about that. I'm also getting used to that.
All right. Looks like I have access to my screen now, and you guys can probably see the windowed version of the presentation. And now you should be able to see the full version of the presentation.
All right, great.
Set.
You guys can all still hear me, right? You only have to listen to my voice for a handful of minutes here. I'm just going to really introduce the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. As many of you will recall, that the MPO adopts a region-wide Metropolitan Transportation Plan every 4 to 5 years. This is our comprehensive document that looks at demographics and looks at the region as it is and the needs that we have into the future, relying heavily on our travel demand model. And ultimately, this identifies deficiencies across the region for all modes and where we should make investments. And you know, what's important here is that this document meets the region's economic, transportation, development, and sustainability goals, which James is going to go into in depth. And as I mentioned earlier, we've just re-looked at the goals and objectives that were in the previous plan, the current plan, and updated them significantly. Most of the intent is there, but they read more like goals and they read more like objectives, but I'll let James go into that. And then, of course, the fiscally constrained 20-year or longer planning horizon that this plan looks at, and the projects that we see coming, which at the end of this presentation, Nate will go through. All right, let's get right into it. Go right ahead, James. This is built off of SNHPC's vision statement. This is out of the 2015 comprehensive plan that the commission developed 5 years ago now, almost 6. And I'm not going to go through all of these. You know, there's 6, 7 different values here in the vision statement, but the 2 that are highlighted in yellow directly speak to transportation, and that's kind of the important ones to as we built the goals and objectives. And these are to expand and improve upon our local and regional transportation choices for all modes of travel, including bicycle and walking, and also that we believe public transit needs to be a priority to enhance our region. Next slide, James. So again, the scope of work, all modes of transportation are considered. We look at data from motor vehicle on highways, transit vehicles, biking and walking, and it doesn't include air travel per se, but connections to the airport and perhaps rail. It includes the federally designated planning factors, which stem, I believe, from the T21 era, updated in the MAP 21, and ultimately the most recent FAST Act, all the federal guidance for this. Next slide, James. This graphic on the right, I'm not going to go into, but you can look at it as I speak. This just shows kind of how the whole world of transportation planning works, and participation, fiscal constraint, all the different components that we're looking at. Here are the federally designated planning factors. The first 8, economy, safety, security, accessibility, mobility, environment, energy, quality of life, which is what QOL is there. Efficiency of operating and maintaining the system, connectivity across modes, preserving what we built, system preservation, and then the newer ones, resiliency and tourism. Adam, I believe those came out of either the FAST Act or MAP 21, I think MAP 21. That's the world of planning factors of the MTP. Next slide. Briefly, here's the table of contents for the rest of the presentation today. I'm doing the introduction. Jim's going to go over goals, objectives, and existing conditions, as well as plan evaluation. And this is jumbled a little bit here. And then when Nate takes over at the end, he'll touch on the travel demand model, which we've recently updated, and the fiscal constraint and our projects list. Next slide. Population. There's demographics here that go into the model and are really ruling on how we look at the future. I'm going to touch on population. I'm also going to touch on employment. Just wanted to give you some, visual candy here. Some of an overview of the demographics and existing conditions. First with population and settlement patterns. Going from left to right, the dark tower here, rectangle, it represents Manchester, and the light blue is all the other municipalities within the region. So in the period from 1980 to 2010, this shows the population growth, and the growth in the region was 20% within Manchester during that 30-year period, and 91% in all the other municipalities outside of Manchester. So that's significant. That's suburban growth. In the 2010 to 2040 period, so looking back 10 years plus another 20 years forward, that changes significantly. The population growth in Manchester is projected to be only 4% of all growth, and 14% in the rest of the municipalities. And then on the far right here, sorry, the angle here with the light, total population, as I understand this, is 173,000 in 1980. In 2010, it's 266,300. And by 2040, it'll be 292,500. And it's just showing kind of a comparative of what's in Manchester versus all other municipalities. Next slide, Jim. Oh yeah. So the breakdown in growth is 54%. 1980 to 2010 was our growth. Click forward. And in the coming, well, the last 10 years plus going forward, in this period, increase in growth population will only be 10%. So it's not growing like we were in the past. Significant change. What does that mean exactly? It just means there won't be as many people coming to the region as projected. And that influences, what we do with road expansion, both more roads and widening roads, additions to roads, signals, etc. Next slide, Jim. This is a little bit of a crazy graph, but each of these lines represents a municipality, and it's just kind of fun to show. Some towns had tremendous growth, over 12% up to 16%, and then came down. Others were relatively flat. But what it's really trying to say here is, again, another way to show that all towns will see less growth in the future than they have in the past. Where the white on the left and the tan on the right, that's the forecast line. A lot of growth looking backwards, and then as we go forward, everybody seems to calm down to a point where the growth in the region's around between 1 and 1.5%. Next slide, Jim. And a little bit on employment. Next slide. And these again are just some fun graphics. I'm not going to show you a lot of numbers here, but just this is very representative of what's happened in the region. Around half of the region's jobs are in blue in the upper left-hand corner, which is Manchester. And then as we go to the right, the majority, meaning over 50% of the region's jobs are in Manchester and Bedford. Lower left, a supermajority, something north of 66%, 60%, is in Manchester, Bedford, and now Londonderry. And the last map on the lower right shows that more than 4 out of 5 of the jobs are just in these 4 towns, adding Hooksett here. So the employment is very concentrated in the region. Next slide, Jim. Yeah, 80% of all jobs are in those 4 towns. Another way to look at where the jobs are is this map. And what we decided to do is look at, this has to do with settlement patterns and where the exits are along our major roads, and shows jobs within 2 miles of our highway exits. Down to the lower right, lower left of the map, it shows 81% of the region's jobs, 60% of the population, and 64% of its housing, and 51% of all of the paved roads are within 2 miles of highway exit. So quite a concentration of a lot of different things that factor into travel throughout the region. And then the kicker here is all on less than a quarter of the overall land in the region. So very concentrated. Next slide, Jim. And this is where I hand it off to Jim.
Great. Thank you, Carl. Today, I'm going to talk to the MPO about the goals and objectives of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And I just want to define give two definitions that will relate to this plan moving forward. And the first is a goal, which is a representation of a desired end state for the region, and an objective, which is a directional trend towards achieving a goal. And so by defining those things, it helped us think a little more concretely about how to define goals and objectives. And this is important because in the 2017 Regional Transportation Plan, which was our previous Metropolitan Transportation Plan, it lacked hierarchy of goals and objectives. In fact, we had 47 goals across different modes of transportation, and it was hard to prioritize or understand where we were trying to go as a regional planning entity. And so we thought, and because these were organized around modes of travel, we couldn't make a sort of a comparative assessment of how different elements of one goal might affect another goal. And the goals weren't always written with a desired end state in mind. So knowing all these things about the 2017 Regional Transportation Plan, we set out to revise the goals in the 2020 to 2045, I guess it's 2021 to 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And so now we have goals and we have objectives that are independently defined, which we talked about in the previous slide. We've narrowed goals down to 8. So we have 8 goals. And within each goal, we have subordinate objectives that support that goal. And the goals now relate pretty directly to federal planning factors, which are an obligation of the MPO. And the goals where they weren't written to reflect an end state now do reflect an end state. To aid in the process of revising these goals into goals and objectives that cut across planning factors, we developed some analysis tools to identify where there was overlap between the 47 existing goals in the 2017 plan and in the scope of work that Carl mentioned earlier in this presentation, the scope being modes of transportation and planning factors. And so to do what we did, we developed a litmus test for regional transportation goals or metropolitan transportation goals now. And this is an example of what that litmus test looks like. And so we took, here, we're looking at existing goal from the 2017 plan. The existing goal stated that we would seek to achieve safer transportation for all users. And the way we sort of identified how relative this was to our scope of work was to identify whether that statement had a direct relation or a tangential relation to each of the planning factors. So on the right-hand side, you see there's this grid, this matrix, and for safety, there's a direct relation. And there was some relation to security as well. You know, being safe kind of goes hand in hand with security. And so we were able to use this litmus test to think about ways to revise the language. So the suggested revision here was to make the following statement: safe and secure transportation for all users. So this seems pretty straightforward. I think you as a group are clever enough to know where we're going with this. So we were able to take and revise this goal to be more comprehensive and interrelate. Now, we did this across all 47 goals that were in the old plan to determine which ones were actually goals and which ones were objectives of a goal. And as Carl mentioned earlier, paramount to that process and paramount to the scope of work of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan are these federally designated planning factors. And so in the graph on the right, which is a little bit outdated, it doesn't have the resiliency and tourism factors in there. But just the same, it shows the interrelationship of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan as the node of planning activity or outlaying document. And then it shows the encompassing planning factors that affect that plan. And then it shows the sort of interrelation with other elements of federal government and other elements of regional planning that that affect the plan and how the plan affects those elements, those other governmental elements. And you can see on the left-hand side of the graphic is plan participation plan is an element of this, and fiscal constraint is an element of this, which Nate will cover later. But I just wanted to come back to this graphic because I think it's really important to note the themes of planning factors designated by the federal government. Because soon as you look at the goals that we've set out in this 2021 to 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, you can quickly see how they interrelate. And so I'm just going to quickly note the 8 goal themes. These are not the full written out goals. Because we're a little time constrained today, I'm just going to talk about the themes. I'm going to give an example, the first 2 goals and objectives, and then we'll move on to the next subject area of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Although I will note that if you have an interest in looking through each of these individual goals, I did put a slide for each one into this presentation, so you can view the presentation online at your leisure, or when the draft document comes out, you can review it there. And we'd love to hear any comment people have about these. So the themes, getting to the point here, the themes are safety and security. That's the first goal theme. Efficiency and preservation is the second. Third is local economy and access. Fourth is regional economy and connectivity. Fifth is global connectivity and tourism. Sixth is resiliency and the environment. Seventh is land use and quality of life. And 8 is authentic engagement. And so we talked a little bit about planning factors. We talked about the difference between a goal and objective. And I'm going to highlight some of these goals and objectives right now. And then I'm going to skip ahead to another section of the MTP to show how this information relates to other activities we do in the regional plan, or the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is plan evaluation. So goal 1, safe and secure transportation for all users. We saw how we use the litmus test to change this goal and make it more comprehensive. And now we can see how some of the other goals that might have existed back in 2017 could be translated into an objective. So within goal 1 of this newly laid out goals and objectives format, you have objective A and objective B. And so let's look at objective A. Decrease transportation-related fatalities and injuries within the region. This is an important one, and as you'll see later, this objective relates back to an obligation we have to report performance measures. So just keep that in mind. And we're going to cover one more right now, and then we're going to skip ahead. Goal 2. All right, so goal 2 of the updated goals and objectives is managed congestion, improved efficiency, and preservation of the existing transportation system. And in this one, we're going to look at subordinate objective C and subordinate objective D. Subordinate objective C says to improve the condition of the region's interstate, road, and bridge facilities. And objective D says increase vehicle freight and transit travel time reliability. For any of you who have seen a presentation on performance measures from the MPO in the past, you already know where we're going with this. These things relate directly back to performance measures we are obligated to collect as a planning organization. All right, so there are 6 more goals in here, along with a variety of objectives. I'm not going to cover all these because we don't have time for that, but just know that they're here and that you can look through each one of these goals and objectives and see how they relate to the content of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and really relate to the needs and objectives of your individual communities. Okay, so we talked about goal 1 and goal 2, and we talked about a couple of objectives of each. And we're going to skip over chapter 4 for now. Nate's going to cover that when he does his presentation. But goals and objectives have a direct relation to plan evaluation for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And you probably know these are most commonly referred to as performance measures and performance targets. And one thing to know about performance measures is they too are federally mandated. And much like our planning factors that we follow as an MPO, the federal government has their own set of national development goals. And those are safety, infrastructure congestion, system reliability, freight movement and economic vitality, environmental sustainability, and reduce project delivery delays. And you will see that these national development goals, to a great degree, sort of drive the performance measures that we are obligated to collect. Safety, for example. Before I go on to the safety thing, let me just note that the performance measures unto themselves are a metric, but they're not a goal. In order to make progress towards a goal, performance measures need targets. A community, just to give a quick example, a community might have 10 pedestrian injuries a year. That's a performance measure. But the goal or the target would be 0 pedestrian injuries in a year. And so that's a target, right? And so you can see how going from 10 to 0 is making progress towards a goal, which is to have, a goal might be to have a safe and secure transportation system, right? So you can see how these things all start to relate to one another. Quickly, I'm going to report out on some of these, right? So we have safety. And so the federal government asks that we report on a series of safety measures, performance measures, and in our, ever expanding effort to be in coordination with other MPOs in the state of New Hampshire, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission has adopted the state of New Hampshire's targets. Again, if you've seen a presentation from Nate or Carl or any of the staff here in the past on performance measures, you've seen this information before, so this is not new. This cuts across safety, for injuries, fatalities, motor vehicles, other modes of transportation. It cuts across condition, so roads and bridges, and whether they're in good or poor condition. And again, the MPO has adopted the state's targets to make progress towards our goals. And then finally, well, not finally, but another area is congestion, reliability, and freight. This is measured in travel time, reliability for both vehicles and on interstate and non-interstate roads. And we've adopted the targets that state of New Hampshire has set, with the exception of interstate truck travel time reliability. And this has to do with some anomalies around tolling and road construction. And so we set a slightly different target than the state to adapt to those anomalies. We do also, there's a goal around environment, right? And so the performance measure we use to track our progress towards environmental goals is CO reduction, or carbon monoxide reduction. This is only reported for Manchester's congestion mitigation air quality projects and not the rest of the region. So this is a bit of a unique situation. And it may be that come February of 2021, which is right around the corner, we may not need to report this anymore. So this may change, but I thought it was worth noting. And then we also report performance for transit-related activities and assets. And so here's another one where we're categorically looking at the useful life of equipment, vehicles, and facilities for, basically Manchester Transit Authority. All right, so I'm just going to recap all this, and then we're going to move on to Nate. But I made this graphic. I thought this was a nice way to sort of show how all these elements interrelate. So on the left is our level of specificity. Oh man, George and I are in the same boat today. Your level of specific information from broad to detailed. So we talked at the very beginning about a vision from the 2015 comprehensive plan, which is a broad statement of the region's desired future condition. We've identified 8 goals, which are idealized achievements derived from the region's vision. We've identified objectives within each one of those goals that are directional trends towards or away from a specific outcome or goal, meeting a goal. And then we identified performance measures, which are specific areas of quantitative calculation that track progression towards a specific objective or goal. And we noted that those were targets, performance targets. And so on the right, you have a continuum of plan evaluation that goes from broad to highly detailed. And you can see it's the same information repeated, right? You have this big, broad vision. And when is that vision? It's, it's someday, it's in the future. Our horizon is 2045. Vision's not perfect. It's not going to be 100% accurate. When we get to 2045, things are going to look different than what we envisioned, but the vision sets a trajectory for us. The next level of specifics would be goals and, as we define, subordinate objectives. And relative to the time scale of information, that's some point, tomorrow. It's some point in the future, but not so far away that we can't measure it or attempt to hit targets relative to measures. And then finally, the most specific, the most current in the time scale of today would be performance measures and our targets, right? So this hopefully helps tie all these things together. I know when I started out in this process of developing the MTP in partnership with other MPO staff, Carl, Nate, Zach, I didn't really understand how these things related to one another. And I put a lot of effort into trying to show the relationship so that, as much as I could understand it, everyone else who may not understand it or may not have understood it when they were starting out could have these tools to help tie all the puzzle pieces together. And so with this vision and looking into the future, I'm going to pass it over to Nate to talk about the project list that results from this, the fiscal constraint that guides that project list, and how we model our needs in order to identify projects. And so I hand it over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Nate's going to take over and share his screen now.
Yeah, thanks, James. And I don't know if Sylvia needs to give me permission to share my screen as well.
I do. While we're doing that, I'm wondering, George, you said you needed to leave early.
No, Sylvia, I can stay for about 15 more minutes, maybe 10, 15 more minutes. So yeah, we're good.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
you're all set, Nate.
Let's see here. Can everybody see this slideshow in full screen format?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to pick up where James just left off and talk about the overall system-wide needs that we're seeing through our regional travel demand model in the metropolitan plan, as well as the transportation improvement projects that you'll see when we publish the draft metropolitan plan. So one of the first things that we did, and it's one of the core elements of our metropolitan plan update, is we worked on updating our regional travel demand model to a 2015 base year and a 2045 horizon year. So it was previously a 2010 base year and a 2040 horizon year. We've updated it 5 years. We used the assistance of our on-call engineering firm, VHB, to provide the assistance with the technical aspects of updating our travel demand model. I think everybody remembers we used to have an in-house expert named Julie Chen who provided that work for us in the past. She lives in Florida now and works for the Broward County Metropolitan Planning Organization. So in her absence, we began utilizing consulting assistance to help us with that. One of the big items that we needed to do in this travel demand model update was to add 4 new towns to the model. Those being Allenstown, Bow, Dunbarton, and Pembroke. And the reason for that is that our metropolitan planning process is required under federal regulations to cover the entirety of the Manchester urbanized area, as defined through the US Census process. Well, in the last census, the Manchester urbanized area began to creep north into the towns of Allenstown, Bow, and Pembroke. And as a result of that, we needed to make sure that our model encompassed those areas. So our model now includes the 14 member municipalities of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, as well as Allenstown, Bow, Dunbarton, and Pembroke. To update the model relies on demographic data projections out to the horizon year. So the horizon year in this case is 2045. So that data that James and Carl were reviewing a few minutes ago, we actually projected that data out to 2045 for population, households, employment, and school enrollment. And that's what the model uses to generate future traffic volumes. So looking at 2015 as our base year, so what we do with the model is we run the base year model, and then we run horizon year models that include both building and not building the projects that are proposed in the metropolitan plan. So kind of our baseline here is the 2015 base model. And everything you see in red on this map are areas where the model is showing some capacity issues. So obviously in 2015, the expansion of I-93 was under construction, but not completed yet. In many cases, it's still not complete to its final capacity. So you see mainline I-93, you see issues on 293, Route 101 in Bedford, US Route 3 in Hooksett, Route 28 in Derry and Londonderry. Those are all showing capacity issues in a 2015 base year, and that holds true to what we've actually observed on the ground. So, from kind of a high level overview of where existing capacity issues are in the region, this holds pretty true, what we're seeing in the 2015 base year model. So what we did, and this is really the heart of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, is we needed to identify the projects needed for our regional transportation network between 2021 and 2045. So we're looking out more than 20 years here to that horizon year of 2045. So to do that, we need to estimate the amount of revenue that we expect to come in to support projects in the region over that period of time, and make sure that the projects that we're proposing are fiscally constrained against those expected revenues. So there's an entire chapter, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but there's an entire chapter that will be in the draft metropolitan plan that documents the fiscal constraint analysis and how we estimated what revenues would be coming into the region versus the expenses related to with the projects that are proposed in the plan. The projects in the plan include all surface transportation modes. So road and bridge, freight, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian. We do not have projects in the plan related to air transportation, because air transportation is covered under a completely different process and is not considered surface transportation for this purpose. So we do discuss in the metropolitan plan the importance of forming transportation connections, multimodal connections with the airport, but we're not programming air-related projects in the metropolitan plan. So how did we go about identifying what projects were going to be in the plan? So this plan covers 2021 to 2045. So for the first 10 years of the plan, we drew exactly upon the 10-year adopted current 10-year transportation improvement plan. So for the first 10 years of our long-range plan, we tie out exactly to what's in the existing New Hampshire 10-year plan. So there's no deviation. And then where the 10-year plan stops and what we call the out years of the metropolitan plan are 2031 to 2045. So to program projects in those out years of the Metropolitan Plan, we looked at the results of our base year travel demand model. We looked at the projects that were identified in the congestion management process that Carl talked about earlier in the meeting, as well as our ITS architecture and other regional reports. We looked at the projects that were identified in local master plans, local and regional corridor studies that had been done over the past number of years and what projects were proposed in those. We looked at the previous Transportation Alternatives Program, CMAQ, build and 10-year plan project applications that came in from municipalities around the region that were not funded. So those are still documented needs on the part of the municipalities. So we wanted to make sure that we did the best we could to incorporate those projects into our Metropolitan Plan. We looked at the statewide plans that identify projects needed within our region as well. One of those is the statewide strategic transit assessment, and we'll talk a little bit about transit projects in a few minutes. And we looked at other special plans and studies that had been done around the region. So we've had previous presentations from James Vayo in our office about the transit-oriented development plan that was recently developed for the city of Manchester. So we look at plans like that, as well as road safety audits and other special studies. That results in more than 125 projects in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And that is those are fiscally constrained. So every one of those more than 125 projects that are in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, we believe can be funded with the anticipated revenue streams that will be coming into the region between now and 2045. So this is not a wish list. These are projects that we believe the funding will be available to potentially fund in the region. I'm going to walk through those projects. So for the next few slides, we're going to highlight some of those projects. There's going to be a lot of text. It's very difficult in this type of format to walk through 125 projects, and I'm not going to walk through 125 projects. You'd be listening to me for a long time, and nobody wants that. So I'm going to hit the highlights of the projects that are in the Metropolitan Plan. And but certainly when we release the plan next week for review and comment, please do feel free to dive into the details of each of these different projects and learn more that way. So I'm going to start with the projects that are in the 10-year plan. Note a few highlights. These are not new projects to all of you. You have seen many of these projects before because they are in the existing 10-year plan. And you played a role as the TAC in helping to prioritize and program these projects. So you see in Bedford, the Route 3 widening from Hawthorne Drive to the Manchester Airport Access Road, the corridor study of Route 114 in Bedford and Goffstown, the Four Corners improvements on 2743 and Raymond Road in the town of Candia, Exit 4A in Derry and Londonderry, the widening of Route 3 from Route 27 to Alice Avenue in Hooksett, the Route 28 and 128 intersection in Londonderry. These are all projects that I think everybody is familiar with, and you've all previously had a role in programming these projects. Also on the 10-year plan, we see the Londonderry, the completion of the Londonderry Trail to the Manchester City line, the Exit 1 interchange improvements that we programmed 4 years ago, the CMAQ projects for adaptive signal control on Granite Street and upgrading the signal performance on South Willow Street, the completion of the South Manchester Rail Trail to the Londonderry Town Line that will connect to the Londonderry Trail, the CMAQ projects that were recently funded in the last round for improvements on South Willow Street and Weston Road in Manchester, as well as the entrance to the Derryfield School, the roundabout conversion at River Road and Bicentennial in Manchester. Those are all in the plan. Wyndham, the safety improvement project on Route 28 and Ralston Road, that was a big focus of our 10-year plan process 2 years ago. There also is an impending project to convert the Bedford F.E. Everett Turnpike Toll Plaza to all electronic tolling. We're looking forward to that. That will really improve congestion in that part of the FE Everett Turnpike, as well as the major projects to reconstruct exit 6 and exit 7 on I-293 in Manchester. Those two projects alone total about $150 million. I think exit 6 is somewhere in the range of 90 to 95 million, and exit 7 is somewhere in the range of 50 to 55 million at the moment. So those are major projects, as well as the pending expansion of the FE Everett Turnpike all the way from exit 8 in Nashua to the 293 interchange in Bedford. So all the way from Nashua to Bedford, all of the 2-lane sections of the FE Everett Turnpike are going to be widened to 3-lane sections. And that's going to have a significant impact on how traffic flows in the region and on that corridor. So those are all, I think, somewhat familiar to everybody in the region. Those are projects that we've been talking about for a number of years. They're in the 10-year plan. Shifting gears to what we call the out-year projects, that being 2031 to 2045. I'm gonna hit some of the highlights here. In Auburn, they have wanted for some time to have multi uses along Route 121. So constructing a multi-use path adjacent to Route 21 from Eaton Hill Road to Shore Drive is in our long-range plan to help them achieve that. In Bedford, we know that supplemental funding is going to be needed for the Route 3 widening project. That's included in the out years of the long-range plan. There are a number, we hear a lot in public hearings and Gasset hearings about the local importance of having adequate noise barriers along the major roadways, the interstates and the turnpike system. The DOT has done a complete analysis of where type 2 noise barriers are warranted throughout the region. So in our long range plan here in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan in the out years, we have programmed all of those noise barriers in the region that were identified in that type 2 New Hampshire DOT study. So those include locations in Auburn and Bedford and Hooksett and Manchester. So all of those are included in our long range plan because we recognize how much people, how popular and important those noise barrier projects are to the affected neighborhoods. We recently, 2 years ago, the widening of Route 101 from 114 to Wallace Road was completed in the town of Bedford. The long range plan includes a continuation of that from Wallace Road to the Amherst town line. So it's a very significant project on Route 101 that's in our long range plan. We also have a number of projects. I won't go through all of them, but to highlight, there's one highlighted here for implementing adaptive signal control on River Road in Bedford. We have similar projects programmed throughout the region. So on Hooksett Road in Hooksett, on Hooksett Road in Manchester, on Crystal Avenue in Derry, you'll see adaptive signal control projects programmed throughout the region in this long metropolitan plan to help us utilize and maximize the existing capacity of those roadways through technology improvements at signalized intersections. In Candia, there was recently a big effort to take a look at future needs in the Four Corners Village area. We know we have a project that will deal with the transportation aspects of the Four Corners Village area, but we also know that there is likely going to be a need for a closed drainage system and potentially sidewalks in that village area in the future. And so we've programmed that in our metropolitan plan. In the town of Chester, it's not an area necessarily that sees a lot of congestion or has needs for large capacity expansions, but the Chester Master Plan and some local road safety audits have identified intersection improvement needs at a number of intersections in the town of Chester. So we have programmed those, including Route 102 and North Pond Road in our long range plan. In Deerfield, we talked, one of the proposals in the current 10-year plan consideration is that roundabout conversion at 107 Church Street and Candia Road. That's in our metropolitan transportation plan, as well as Derry's proposal to extend the Derry Rail Trail from Madden Road to the Londonderry town line. That's the completion of the Derry Rail Trail within the town of Derry, So that's reflected as well in our metropolitan plan. The town of Francistown has worked for some time to try to improve pedestrian activity and pedestrian access to their village center. This was a location where they actually had the assistance of a UNH student doing a capstone project to look at how to engineer the pedestrian improvements in the Francistown Village Center. So that's in our metropolitan plan, recognizing the town's longstanding desire to improve and calm traffic and improve pedestrian access to their village. We know that the corridor study of 114 is pending in Bedford and Goffstown. So, and we anticipate that there will be some operational and capacity improvements identified through that corridor study in the town of Goffstown from Mast Road to Henry Bridge Road. So we have programmed an implementation project for that in our metropolitan plan. Bruce Thomas is on the call today, and I know that if we were to ask him what one of his immediate priorities is, I'm sure he would say an engineering study of Route 3A from Hackett Hill Road to Main Street. We have programmed that in our metropolitan plan to implement that type of engineering study to help the town identify what improvement options might be feasible there. We've also identified the need for a potential widening of US Route 3 in Hooksett from Legends Drive to Hunt Street, as well as, once again, I talked a little bit about these projects, but adaptive signal control on that heavily signalized section of Hooksett Road within the town of Hooksett. In Londonderry, we know now that a supplemental funding is going to be needed to implement the Route 28 and 128 project. So that's included in the out years of our metropolitan plan. There are some capacity improvements identified in Londonderry as well, including capacity improvements on Route 28 from Vista Ridge Drive to the intersection of Route 128. So that's also in our metropolitan plan. In Manchester, one of our big focuses right now is looking at how to implement an engineering study of 2nd Street and the I-293 corridor from Exit 5 to Route 101. That's in our long range plans out years. Improvements to the Campbell Street intersections that we're looking at, as well as the Wellington Road Exit 8 interchange. Those are both being proposed for 10-year plan considerations, and they are both reflected in our metropolitan transportation plan. Looking at it longer further in the out years, after the Exit 6 and 7 projects are done on I-293, the model work is telling us that the next wave, and I think if folks were here from the DOT's Turnpike Bureau, they would probably, I think, concur with this. The next wave of major projects after Exit 6 and 7 is going to be looking south of Exit 5 on I-293. So we have programmed large projects to reconstruct the I-293 Exit 4 interchange, as well as expand the I-293 main line to 3 lanes in each direction from Exit 5 to the Route 101 interchange. Those are very significant projects, but they will be, like I say, the next wave of turnpike needs after the Exit 6 and 7 project is complete. Also in Manchester, the 3 projects that were components of the recent build grant effort within the city of Manchester, that being, if you're familiar with the Queen City Avenue, Scilly Road, South Willow Street interchange, converting that to a dual roundabout system. Some people would call it a dog bone roundabout system. As well as converting the former Manchester Lawrence Railroad corridor into a vehicular roadway with a multi-use path from South Commercial Street to Queen City Avenue, constructing a pedestrian bridge at the intersection of Granite and Commercial Street. All of those were proposed for the past 2 years in Manchester's build grant applications. They are stated priorities within the city of Manchester, so we want to make sure that those are reflected in our metropolitan plan. As well as 2 of the items that were identified in the recent transit-oriented development plan process in Manchester. establishing a new north-south roadway from South Commercial Street to Sundial Avenue, as well as constructing the multimodal transportation center to potentially facilitate the interconnection of passenger rail service potentially in the future with local transit service. We've also identified a few different ITS projects, what we call ITS projects, Intelligent Transportation System projects. And one of those is we've identified for the area of Route 101 east of I-93. That's the limited access area from Manchester through Auburn and Candia. If you've been seeing what's been happening on the F.E. Everett Turnpike, you'll notice that they've been installing dynamic message board signs, closed circuit cameras, roadway detectors, and wireless communication improvements to the traffic management center in Concord. Those are all part of upgrading the F.E. Everett Turnpike's ITS capabilities. We envision a similar project on Route 101 east of I-93. So we've programmed that in the long range plan. In New Boston, there are a number of different projects that are needed from an infrastructure and pavement rehabilitation aspect. Pavement rehabilitation on Route 136, shoulder and drainage improvements on Route 13, but also completing the connection between the New Boston Rail Trail and the Goffstown Rail Trail. I know that's of particular interest to both communities. And we had a presentation last year from Larry Keniston at New Hampshire DOT that was discussing his ideas for how to make those connections. So we have programmed that project in our metropolitan plan. In Ware, also needs pavement rehabilitation on some of the state highways within the town of Ware, including on Route 77. And in Windham, we have programmed a large project to implement the recommendations of their Route 111 corridor study from a few years ago, which would convert Route 111 to a 4-lane divided boulevard-style road between Wall Street and Hardwood Road, with 2-lane roundabouts at 4 different intersections in that corridor. So this is a substantial project, and it came out of a detailed engineering study that the MPO, as well as the town and New Hampshire DOT coordinated on a few years ago. So that will be a major project in the town of Windham in our metropolitan plan. So those are some of the highway and bridge and bicycle and pedestrian highlights. On the transit side of things, we do have the project programmed, which is pending to do the design, environmental review, and financial plan for what's called the Capital Corridor commuter rail extension from Massachusetts to New Hampshire. So that is in that, what they call the project development phase is included in our metropolitan plan. That's also a 10-year plan project, so it was passed by the legislature. Whether or not that project ends up moving forward towards construction will ultimately be a political decision by the state legislature. But we do have the engineering phase work in the long range plan as it is in the 10-year plan. The continuing programmatic authorizations for section 5307, which is urban transit funding for MTA and CART services, as well as the continued funding of our section 5310 services that are overseen by the Region 8 and 9 Coordinating Council. That's the Dairy Londonderry Nutrition Shuttle that CART provides, the Hooksett Shuttle, and the Goffstown shuttles that MTA provides, as well as the volunteer driver services that caregivers and Catholic Charities provide. That's all in the continuing those efforts is in our metropolitan plan. So we also recently, the state has what's called a discretionary transfer of some CMAQ funding to support the continued development of transit around the state. We anticipate that somewhere around $220,000 is going to be coming into the region from that CMAQ transfer that could be used, $220,000 per year, that could be used to implement some of the transit services that were identified, transit expansions that were identified both in our CMP as well as the state's strategic statewide transit assessment. So One of the lowest hanging fruit there is looking at implementing commuter transit service that would connect Salem to Manchester. So looking at connecting Tuscan Village in Salem with exit 3 in Wyndham, with Woodmont Commons at exit 4, with and then into the downtown Manchester Mill Yard area. That would be one of the first services that we would envision implementing. So that's in our metropolitan transportation plan as well from a transit side. So all of those projects are fiscally constrained. We were not able to include every project that was on, our potential list. Although we went as far as we could with the available funding that we anticipated to come into the region. So we anticipate between 2021 and 2045 about $1.53 billion of revenues coming into the region to support transportation infrastructure projects. Our metropolitan plan, all of those 125 projects, fully programs that. That was not the case a few years ago with our last metropolitan plan. We were under-programmed in the out years. That is not the case this time. We are fully programmed all the way through 2045. On the transit side, we are fully programmed for the expected $204 million that will be coming into the region between now and 2045 to support transit projects. So we are pleased that the Metropolitan Transportation Plan is going to be fully programmed. So no more under programming in the out years, Lee. I know that was one of the items that came up in our review, but we are fully programmed out to 2045 in this Metropolitan Plan. What does that yield us at the end of the day? If all of those projects get constructed, what does that look like? And we go back to the model for that. So we talked about our 2015 base year model a few minutes ago. We have a build model for the horizon year 2045. And that looks like this. We have limited resources to program projects. So we can't fix every issue that exists within the region. Although you'll see, if you were to compare this map with the map that I showed earlier, there are some substantial improvements around the region. There are improvements on the I-93 corridor. There are improvements on the Route 28 corridor. We still will have some areas of continued concern because the funding that we have to draw upon to support transportation improvements is limited. So when you have limited funding, you can't fix everything. So I-293 south of Route 101 is going to continue to be an area of concern. Exit 4 on I-93 will likely be a continued area of concern, as well as Route 3 in Hooksett. So we're going to keep a close eye on some of those areas. But overall, the proposed program of projects makes a substantial improvement throughout the region, notwithstanding the growth in travel that we are expecting to see between 2015 and 2045 as a result of modest population growth, some employment growth, and some continued housing development in the region. So overall, that's kind of the snapshot of our long-range plan project and fiscal constraint and modeling. Most of this will be laid out in much more detail when we release our draft long-range plan or metropolitan transportation plan. We're going to be releasing it next Wednesday for a 30-day comment period. So all of the TAC members will have the opportunity to review the plan between now and the next TAC meeting, review the draft, and at the next TAC meeting, we'll have more opportunities to hear feedback, and we'll certainly have a significant agenda item to continue discussion on the draft metropolitan plan, as well as hear any comments from TAC members. So stay tuned for the release of the plan next Wednesday. I do see a chat item. So good to see the MTP. This is from Lee. Good to see the MTP programming in outer years. Could you briefly speak to revenue assumptions for those outer years in highways and transit? So on the highway side, Lee, we looked at the federal highway statewide allocation that comes into New Hampshire. We broke out what our region's expected portion of that would be based on a formula of 50% population and 50% federal aid lane miles. We beyond 2030, at the end, we mirrored the state's assumptions through 2030. Beyond 2030, we assumed a 1% increase per year in that funding out to 2045, based on historic trends in the region for Title 23 funding. On the transit side, we assumed a 2% increase beyond 2030 per year. And that's transit allocations in the region have been growing. Transit allocations in New Hampshire have been growing at a slightly larger pace than Title 23 allocations in New Hampshire. So we also looked on the highway side at turnpike revenue and what that's obviously that's not federal revenue, but it's part of our fiscal constraint equation. So we looked at turnpike revenue and potential turnpike expenditures. We grew that also at 1% in the out years. And we, on the project expense side, we adopted all of the project expenses as detailed in the existing 10-year plan for the first 10 years. For the out year projects, we looked at costs in today's dollars and inflated those at 2.55% per year out to the year of expenditure. So we have a 2.55% expense inflation rate on project costs and a 1% growth rate assumed in revenue on the revenue side of that equation. So I could certainly go through that in more detail. It's been fiscal constraints has been a significant part of my life for the past few weeks, and I'm happy to discuss it in a lot of detail, but I know we're at our bewitching hour, and Lee, I'd be happy to share with you our draft fiscal constraint tables for you to take a detailed look at our assumptions. Or you could just wait till the plan comes out next Wednesday, and those tables will be in there as well. So that's, I know we're at our bewitching hour. I don't think we have anything else on the agenda, so I will yield back the floor.
Oh, sorry, Nate. Thank you, Nate. Mark, I see your hand up. I'm sorry, Nate.
Yes, two, I think, easy questions. Who evaluated the litmus test results? And then number two, this is probably for Nate. You were talking about how you came up with the projects in the tip. Were SEDS projects included in the tip for those who are in the SEDS zone?
I can tackle the litmus test thing if you'd like. Yep. So we use that as an internal tool to help us make sure that the goals that were outlined in 2017 met the basic scope of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and that scope was mode of transportation and federally designated planning factors. And so the litmus test was very literally, a horizontal and vertical matrix of those two elements of scope. And then, it was like Carl and I and a couple staff sitting down, going through each one of those objectives, identifying how they match up with scope, identifying how much they overlay with other objectives that were, the other 46 objectives that were listed, and then revising the language to be as concise as possible. And where it was a goal, identify a desired end state, and where it was an objective, identify a trend that supported in a primary goal. And so the litmus test was really an internal tool we derived to help us make sense of all the content that was there from 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would note, Mark, that when we put the plan out for comment period, if there's any disagreement with any of the goals or objectives outlined in the plan or the wording of said goals or objectives, there's a comment period in order to hear that feedback and make any adjustments that TAC members or MPO members may have, or members of the public. So these aren't, final language. It's a starting point for you and other members of the TAC, as well as members of the MPO, to review and offer comments. So on the second question you had, Mark, about SEDS, yes, we looked at SEDS. A number of projects that you'll see in the long range plan do tie back to the SEDS. So the Manchester Riverwalk project is in the long range plan, for instance, that was in the SEDS. Or the biggest one that was in the SEDS from a cost perspective that we did not have the ability to include in the long range plan or the metropolitan plan due to fiscal constraint was the second pedestrian bridge in Manchester. The proposed, that's in the SEDS, there's a proposed second pedestrian bridge. It would be about $14 million construction phase in today's dollars. At least that's what's in the SEDS. We didn't have the fiscal constraint ability to fit that project into the metropolitan plan. So for that reason, that bridge that's in the SEDS is not in the metropolitan plan, but most of the other projects that were outlined in the SEDS, we did put into the metropolitan plan, and that was one of the sources that we looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Nate, just for clarification, that second bridge, that was also part of the Manchester Connects programming, that you're talking about that bridge, right?
I am talking about that bridge, correct.
Okay, so I'm gonna say why on that, but on, I had a quick question. One of the transit projects, the rail corridor project, I was just wondering if we at all touched base with Nashua RPC to see if they also have that in their long range plan.
They do have the project development phase of the Capitol corridor. You know, on the pedestrian bridge, you know, I recognize that you know, fiscal constraint is what it is. The price tag of that particular project, especially when you're inflating it 2.55% per year, becomes a real challenge to fit in. That's not to say that, you know, if we didn't get a lot of public comments about, you know, including that we couldn't include it. It's just, if we do include it, the equivalent amount of other projects need to be removed. So what are we willing to trade off to include that? The price tag of that one is just pretty large when it's inflated 2.55% per year out to the horizon.
Right.
Thank you, Nate and James and Carl. Great job, guys. Any questions? Any more comments? Okay, I know we're tight on time, so I'll just ask: is there any old business or new business for the agenda? James has his hand up. James.
Not business, just an announcement that New Hampshire DOT has announced that in January, the Transportation Alternatives Program solicitation is going to begin again. So you may remember there's a biannual grant funding round. It was delayed from 2020, but it looks like DOT is going to initiate that round in January 2021. And so if there's interest in TAP applications from member communities, this is a little heads up that information is coming in January.
How much is available?
The DOT webpage does not have any application information available yet, but they have made an announcement on their page. So I just wanted to give people a heads up.
And I have a quick announcement too, George. This is at a completely different scale than what we've just been hearing from Nate. And by the way, I just think that the whole group did a fantastic job overviewing all those projects and the whole process. So thanks to Carl, James, and Nate. But on a whole different scale, back to something a little bit smaller, but also important, thank you, Linda, is that tonight is Adam and I have been involved with 3 communities in our region: Auburn, Bedford, and Francistown. And today, well, later this afternoon and tonight, we're going to be working with the librarians from Bedford and Francistown, where we have coordinated virtual volunteer fairs. And this all is from our work with volunteer driver programs in hopes to recruit new volunteers. And we have coordinated with the librarians and with other agencies also looking to volunteers. Last night, yesterday afternoon, we had our first one in Auburn. It turns out that who comes to these sorts of meetings? Well, it was all women. except for James at Caregivers. And it turns out it's people who have recently retired. So interestingly enough, people who have just recently retired are now stuck home due to COVID, and they're wondering how they can volunteer. So I'll be curious who shows up for today. And, but we hope that this will be sort of a pilot program for other virtual volunteer fairs. And anyway, so if you're interested, happy to share the links if you would like to join in just to see, but we have had interest from other volunteer driver programs around the state, and hopefully we might encourage our other RPCs to work with librarians in doing something similar. So I know very different scale than $18 million bridges, but there you have it. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sylvia. Anything else? Anything new or old?
I
Okay,
think just
great, Sylvia.
yeah, just I think if we usually for the end, we just do a round of thumbs ups for adjourning the meeting.
So motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mark, seconded by somebody. Somebody just said yes.
Yes.
Okay. Mike, Mark said yes, seconded, so we're good. Thank you, everybody, and happy holidays and happy new year, and see you in January. Thank
See you in January, everyone. Thank you.
Happy holidays.